We had an absolutely loaded weekend in Duke athletics. The Blue Devils pick up a win on Friday night over Indiana State. This Cameron Boozer guy, he's sensational.
Hi, everybody. Dick Vitale. Hey, make sure you listen, man, to Locked On Blue Devils with J.J. Jackson. He's awesome, baby.
You are Locked On Blue Devils, your daily podcast on the Duke Blue Devils. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everybody. Welcome into another episode of the Locked On Blue Devils podcast. My name is JJ Jackson. It's so great to have you here with us today on Monday, November 17th, 2025, as Locked On Blue Devils is your one-stop shop where we discuss everything going on inside the life of Duke athletics. On today's show, we're going to talk about Duke basketball's win over Indiana State. The Blue Devils also with exciting recruiting news as the one and only Cameron Williams commits to join Jon Scheyer and the Brotherhood, their third commit in the class of 2026. And then finally, we'll break down Duke football's disappointing loss to Virginia on Saturday from Wallace Wade Stadium. Hugh Straine from Ball Durham will join us on the show today. If you haven't done so already, please be sure to follow and subscribe to Locked On Blue Devils for free, wherever it is that you get your podcast. Go ahead and leave us a 5-star rating and written review on the Apple Podcast platform. The algorithms love it when you take time to fill out one of those written reviews, and I appreciate the support that you give us there. Watch our show each and every day on YouTube. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Like this video. Share it with your friends. Really encouraging numbers that we've seen lately here at Locked On Blue Devils, and I want to continue growing the audience as we get deeper and deeper into this college basketball season, as we are proudly a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Now, the number one sports podcast network in the world. Pretty awesome stuff we're cooking here at Locked On. So, without further ado, my man, Hugh Straine, back with us once again, and I teased it there in the open, Hugh. Sensational is a pretty easy word to describe what we've seen out of Cameron Boozer to start his college career. That was a whole lot of fun. Hope you're doing well today, man.
Doing great, JJ. Awesome weekend of Duke sports. Got a lot to talk about. Excited to be here.
Yeah, let's dive into it, man. Indiana State, the opponent for the Blue Devils, where Duke picks up a 38-point victory over Indiana. They hit that 100-point mark. Indiana State gets at 62. First time someone's kind of gotten over that 60-point threshold this season for the Blue Devils, and yet they find a way to cover. Vegas is so good with these spot-on lines, so accurate with what they look at here. But just your overall general impressions for the win.
Yeah, I think we talked about a couple weeks ago how Duke seemed very far beyond defensively than offensively. I think that's quickly beginning to even out, not just with how dominant Cam Boozer's been, but Duke is starting to really get comfortable with a lot of its guys, and the rotation just seems to be kind of figuring itself out. 6 different guys scored at least 8 points against Indiana State, 22 assists on 38 made field goals. They won the paint battle 54-26. It's absolutely dominated inside. And I think the first few games of the season and the exhibition, it looked like the defense was just clearly way ahead of the offense. And I think that's really, really shortening that gap really quickly. And I think Duke can score in so many different ways. And I think there's a chance that this team can be one of the most prolific offenses in the country, if not the most prolific.
Yeah, what's so interesting is that through 3 seasons and now going into year 4 with Jon Scheyer, the halftime adjustments are so clear, so evident. The guy can really coach. And I've also enjoyed this season the added wrinkle where Duke's social media staff is putting out these clips of Jon Scheyer drawing up the first play of the game, and then immediately Duke goes out and scores. But beyond that, there have been some slower starts in the first half. You look at that final score, 100-62. It's easy to forget, Hugh, that Duke was down by 10 early on in this game against the Sycamores.
Yeah, really, that was a big hiccup that kind of in the moment was, what was going on. And it was another slow start, but the slow start didn't continue. Duke went up the half up by about 20 points. And we've seen through the first few games, maybe a sloppy half or at least a sloppy, 15 minutes. This was just a sloppy couple of minutes. It's very strange how consistent it's been, in my opinion. It just seems like such a almost random issue, just a slow start, and then you figure it out every single time so far. So that's why I just don't think it's something to really worry about. But it was, a slow few minutes as opposed to a lot of minutes. And against a team like Kansas that's ranked, we'll see if that actually begins to pay dividends against a really, really talented high major program. But it hasn't hindered him yet. Duke still has not lost a game, hasn't really come all that close to losing a game. It's a strange issue more than I think it's a concerning one, because every single time Duke has completely folded to the other side and kind of dominated in the second half of games. So I'm not really thinking about it. I'm more just something I'm a little confused about.
Yeah. Yeah. It was 14-4 Indiana State early in this one. And credit to them because they started 4 of 5 from 3-point range. I mean, when you're hitting some of the tough shots they were making in Cameron, clearly juiced for the opportunity to play in Cameron Indoor. First time ever that those two schools, Duke and Indiana State, had ever played a basketball game. And Duke obviously put their foot down, started to make some great plays, and went to Cameron Boozer for so much of the opportunity. When there's a slow start, find number 12. That's what we've seen Duke do so far. Finishes with 35 points, 12 rebounds, 5 assists, 13 of 16 shooting. And the most impressive thing that people want to talk about, I know that you noticed this as well, Hugh, all of his misses turned into makes for Cameron Boozer. Every shot that he missed, he was able to get his own rebound and put it up and in for a bucket. I don't know that I've ever seen something like that before.
Yeah, he had 12 rebounds on the night. 7 of them were on the offensive glass. He's just been so dominant. He had that stat line of 35, 12, 5, 3 steals, and 3 blocks. He did it all in 29 minutes of action. I don't care who you're playing. That doesn't make any sense. We said it before the season started. I still think he's the most complete player in the entire country. Forget freshman. This is the best freshman class we've ever seen. And I think he's the most complete player in that's a part of that class. Not necessarily the most talented, the most athletic, the most gifted. I think he is the best all-around player, and he's really putting a lot of pressure on what it seems to be AJ DeBonsa early on to be the number 1 overall pick in the 2026 NBA draft. But there's so many different ways this guy can score while also being Duke's best rebounder, Duke's best passer, and a top 3 to 4 defender on the team that can guard the 1 through 4 and sometimes the 1 through 5. He's not the most athletic guy, but he's so smart. I thought this was his best defensive performance against Indiana State so far this season. He was super active getting into passing lanes, had an awesome play where he made that steal out on the perimeter behind the back to swipe the defender. Reminded me of Zion in the round of 64 back in 2019, if you remember that. But I think he's the most complete player in the country, and he's just going to continue to dominate throughout the rest of the season.
Yeah, that play is easy to remind you of Cooper Flagg as well. I mean, some of the clips that we're seeing from over the weekend, a lot of breakaway kind of behind the back moves that Cooper's doing and able to finish through contact. So, but with Cameron Boozer specifically, again, just the numbers are insane. And you feel like you had Cooper Flagg last year. How in the world could someone follow this up? But so far, 4 games in, we're on the same path. Once again, Hugh, where one player for Duke individually is leading them in all 5 major counting statistical categories. It's insane.
It's wild how I think Jon Scheyer deserves a lot of credit. I think he's the best developer of talent in the entire country. And right away, he has his freshman, specifically Cam Boozer, playing probably the best basketball he possibly could play right now, at least as far as I can expect with how elite he's been. I think there are a lot of coaches in the country that just can't do that. But Boozer's on his way to breaking Duke's freshman scoring record. It's just been insane, the level of production. I mean, 35 points and 12 rebounds in less than 30 minutes of action just shouldn't happen. And we knew he was going to be the go-to guy offensively, but he doesn't force anything, which I think also says a lot about his game. He doesn't demand the ball necessarily. He just puts himself in a position to find easy looks. He's not, taking possessions away. He's not demanding the ball. It doesn't seem like Duke is forcing it to him like they need to, like everything revolves around it. It just seems like he's giving himself good action and getting himself available, and he's creating good looks, and he's fighting for his offensive boards, creating second chance opportunities. There's just so many ways he can score. He's also absolutely dominating at the free throw line. It's insane. He's one of the best free throw shooters in the country so far right now, just with the sheer volume that he's taking free throws. But again, there's just so many different ways he can score, and he impacts the game in literally every single way, similar to what we saw from Cooper Flagg.
It was noteworthy on Friday, the name Cameron Boozer, Cameron Indoor Stadium. How about Cameron Williams, the newest commit for the Brotherhood in the class of 2026? That also came through on Friday night. Let's break it all down when Locked On Blue Devils continues. Locked On Blue Devils here today is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. The NBA is back, and there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you missed the start of the game or want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. It keeps every game exciting, especially when your team's making that late push. Right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So head to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. FanDuel is a proud sponsor of Locked On Blue Devils. All right, we keep the show going. Hugh Straine is here from Ball Durham. We're talking about Cameron's. Again, Cameron Indoor Stadium, rocking Friday night as Duke won by 38 points. They were led by freshman Cameron Boozer, who had 35 points, 12 rebounds, 5 assists, 3 steals, 3 blocks. And then Cameron Williams, one of the top recruits in the class of 2026, decides to commit to the Blue Devils over the Arizona Wildcats. And important to note, he's a state of Arizona native, spurns the hometown school. He's coming to play basketball at Duke.
Yeah, top 5 prospect in the class of 2026, the number 4 overall recruit, number 1 power forward per 247, their 2026 composite rankings. A super intriguing prospect for Duke fans to follow over the next few years. One of the biggest risers, maybe the biggest riser of the entire 2026 recruiting class over the last year. He's very, very talented offensively, is a deep arsenal as a 6'9" power forward, but also really, really good rim protector, great interior defender. But what makes him so interesting for Duke fans to watch long-term is he's so far from a finished product, and he's a very intriguing 5-star because there's a really good chance that he doesn't stay in college for 1 year. And if you're a 5-star prospect coming to Duke, it's almost, an afterthought if you would even consider staying for more than 1 year. But this 2026 recruiting class is so interesting because most of the talent outside of Tyron Stokes, who's the number 1 player, is viewed as very developmental, very long-term, not a lot of talent that can impact a championship caliber team, at least on a significant level, right away. So I think he's a super cool prospect to watch for Duke fans. He could be in college for potentially 2-3 years, especially with this NIL era, but the perfect prospect for Jon Scheyer to get his hands on, a guy that's already super talented on both sides of the ball, but a guy that has so much room to grow.
I definitely agree. I mean, you look at what he's been able to do throughout his playing career, some USA basketball experience already for Cameron Williams, what he's doing on the circuits and that sort of thing. It's been so obvious in conversations that we've had with recruiting experts over the course of the summer, to your point, that there's not the Cameron Boozers, Darren Petersons, Caleb Wilsons, AJ DeBonsa's, all the great players, Nate Ament in this current class. It's going to be a bit of a drop-off. But all that said, this is still one of the top players in the country, and he's still choosing to come play basketball at Duke. He's talked so often about Jason Tatum being his favorite player in the NBA, and noteworthy, Jason Tatum sitting right there with Cameron Williams and Jordan Smith Jr., by the way, who remains uncommitted at Countdown to Craziness to open up this college basketball season.
Yeah, I think the reason Cameron Williams is rated so high is because his long-term ceiling could potentially be the highest of anybody in the entire class. With the intangibles, his length, he's definitely got to put on a little bit of weight, but his length and footwork with where he is at right now poses really, really well for the next level, especially at the NBA level in a couple of years. But a guy that I know Jon Scheyer is super excited to get his hands on. He said when he committed, he told 247 Sports insider Travis Branham that he thought the Duke coaching staff believed in him the most. And I think that just shows that the kind of prospect he is, and he's going to be an impact player from day one. We just don't necessarily know what that impact's going to be, but he's just the next domino to fall. Duke now has 2 5-star commits in the class of 26, along with Bryson Howard, number 1 overall recruiting class per On3, number 4, according to 247. But Jon Scheyer is not even close to done. Austin Gooseby, a 5-star guard, he'll be announcing his commitment later today. Deron Rippey Jr. recently announced his top 5 this morning. That included Duke. Jordan Smith, 5-star guard, is also considering Duke. A lot going on with Duke recruiting right now.
Yeah, and, Sayon Keita, another name that we're going to be closely monitoring coming over from FC Barcelona. He's going to have a few more visits later this month to Duke and Kentucky and a few other schools. So that's exciting that this class continues to build a little bit more. But Cameron Williams is the newest guy in the boat, someone who also has recently had an official visit to Duke. You just mentioned it a moment ago. Rippey Jr., the point guard, Deron Rippey Jr., cuts his list down to 5 today. That's noteworthy, Hugh, just because this is the same player who had lined up 11 official visits. So we're at least making some progress in what many consider to be the number 1 point guard in the country. Duke's got a very interesting point guard conversation to have going into next season. Will Caleb Foster and Caden Boozer both be back? Will both be moving on? Will one come back? How does all of that kind of add up in the decision-making process for someone like Deron Rippey? But again, having 11 official visits, and now you've released a top 5. That includes Duke. It includes Tennessee, who, by the way, was his official visit when Duke won that exhibition game. That obviously helps. It's a significant update in Rippey's recruitment.
Yeah, he had probably the busiest fall of any top recruit in the entire 26 class.
That's a good way to put it. Yeah,
for a couple months. He was on a new campus, but we expected after his NC State visit, which was his final one, for that list to drop. It did. Duke is included with it, along with NC State, Miami, Texas, and Tennessee. So not a timetable on when he's going to commit, but Duke is certainly considered one of the top schools in terms of in contention for his services among the top 5. Said he loved his time at Duke. Says the fact that Jon Scheyer got an extension means something to him. He talked about how Duke had 5 NBA draft picks last year. Duke has breeded guards for the last couple of years. Yep. And he could be the perfect addition to this recruiting class that now features 3 front court players. He's an elite playmaker at 6'2", can handle the basketball, performed really, really well at Steph Curry's camp over the summer, really separated himself. So a prospect I'm super excited about, and a guy that Duke is absolutely in contention for. But we don't know when he's necessarily going to commit, even if that's going to be within the early signing period. Again, Duke has really gained some momentum, potentially even more in about an hour and a half here Eastern time. But we don't know his timetable yet, but Duke is certainly one of the 2 to 3 schools that are firmly in the running and considered to be potentially in the lead, but no clear leader has been established yet, at least as far as I know.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Jordan Smith Jr., one of the top players in the entire country. He goes to PVI. They're in the DMV area. He is considering Duke. He's already been on official visits to Duke. A lot of people expect him to ultimately end up wearing that Duke uniform. He's just going to wait to make his commitment decision. And you do feel good about it, but also in some ways, Hugh, there are a lot of Duke fans out there making the argument, if you know, why not go ahead and make this thing official? Duke would really feel much better if Jordan Smith Jr., who has always been the number 1 guy that this Duke coaching staff wants in the class, remains uncommitted and remains to be, not in any – there's no urgency, I should say, from him to make this decision.
Yeah, I mean, you got to think potentially NIL talks are a factor in that, potentially leveraging his situation with other schools that are offering more, with maybe Duke, that's a school he wants to go to, which is a completely fair thing for Jordan Smith to be doing. But I think he knows wherever he ends up, he's going to be the number 1 option. He's probably going to be the top recruit in whatever recruiting class he ends up in. Even if Duke ends up landing Deron Rippey Jr. and Austin Gooseby, Jordan Smith is still probably the best freshman guard in that class. But maybe he's waiting to see if Gooseby and Rippey do commit to Duke, both commit to Duke. That probably changes his decision. He went to Countdown to Craziness with Cameron Williams Jr. and then received a crystal ball prediction to Duke about 2 days after. So as of right now, certainly favored to end up at Duke. I don't think Austin Gooseby or Rippey are necessarily favored to end up at Duke, but Jordan Smith picked up a crystal ball prediction. Duke is certainly the favorite for his services, but if Gooseby and Rippey end up both committing to Duke, I assume that would change his decision a little bit. I'm assuming he wants to go to a place where he's the clear number 1 option and won't have to compete for touches. And with 3 5-star guards on one roster, you're probably going to be competing for some touches.
Yeah, and as you said, later today, Austin Gooseby makes that decision, a Final Four that is featuring Duke, BYU, Baylor, Texas also in the mix for the state of Texas native and Austin Gooseby. So we'll see all that come to a close here in just a moment. All right, so that's a little recruiting talk on the Duke basketball side of things. When we come back, we'll shift gears a little bit. We got to talk football and what was ultimately a disappointing outing for Manny Diaz and company as Duke, really tough loss against Virginia. That's coming up here in a moment on Locked On Blue Devils. Thank you so much for making Locked On Blue Devils your first listen and your first watch here today. For your second listen, go ahead and make sure that you check out Locked On ACC. Locked On ACC is hosted by Kenton Gibbs and Alex Dono, breaking down the most interesting conference in college sports, from rivalries to championships, every game in between. Find Locked On ACC on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Then check out Locked On College Basketball with Isaac Shade and Andy Patton. Those two guys do an unbelievable job of breaking down college hoops. Tomorrow, we've got the Champions Classic coming up with the Blue Devils. I'm going to be on a special Locked On College Basketball episode with the other hosts from the schools participating in the Champions Classic. Check that out on the Locked On College Basketball feed, all a part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Thank you for making us the #1 sports podcast network in the whole galaxy. We appreciate your love and support. All right, let's keep moving forward. We've got Hugh Straine here, our friend from Ball Durham. Now we got to talk a little football here, man. And Saturday, Duke had every opportunity in front of them at home, hosting the Virginia Cavaliers against Tony Elliott. Their injured quarterback, Chandler Morris, gave it a go. He was in concussion protocol from the week prior in their loss to Wake Forest. And at the end of the day, it's Virginia who walks away with the victory over Duke. Frustrating, disappointing. There are a lot of negative adjectives that you could throw out there when you break down this game.
Yeah, I don't think Duke football could have picked a more deflating way to not literally, but basically end the season off.
Deflating is a great word too. Yeah. Absolutely.
That's what comes to mind right away. ACC championship hopes are now over. College football playoff hopes are now over. Duke was dominated in every single facet of that game. The score doesn't reflect how dominant Virginia really was. I mean, you couldn't have really asked for a better opportunity at home against a ranked team coming off an upset loss to Wake Forest. And if Duke won that game, all they had to do was beat North Carolina on the road and Wake Forest at home to more or less probably lock itself into the ACC championship game. And with two bottom-tier ACC teams that are North Carolina and Wake Forest, just couldn't have been a more missed opportunity by Duke, and especially the way they lost the game. The fight wasn't there. It just did not look like a Duke team that was ready for a game like that, especially at home, or was ready to win a game like that. Duke's now going to end the season 0-3 against ranked opponents at home, with losses to Illinois, Georgia Tech, and now Virginia. It was a game that Duke should have at least been competitive in, and I don't think it could have gone much worse.
Yeah, no, I mean, you look at this game in particular, Hugh, and quarterback Darian Mensah had the fewest passing yards that he's had all season at 216. There have been games in which he has not played well because turnovers have been a major issue for what was playing out and taking place. This game against Virginia, it didn't matter what Duke tried to dial up offensively for the overwhelming portion of this football game. The offense was almost in 3-and-out mode, man, where you just, for the first time all season, you didn't really feel that confident when Duke had the football going up against that Virginia defense.
No, this was the first game, I think, for Duke all season that they didn't look competitive in for all 4 quarters. I mean, Duke had 3 points through 3 quarters.
Yeah.
It just doesn't really add up. I mean, even in both games against Georgia Tech and Illinois, Duke's marquee games at home that we had the same sort of buildup with, they at least look competitive, and Duke fans almost walked out of that frustrated because there looked like potential to win the game, especially against Illinois. But Duke was dominated in every single way. Virginia deserved to win that game. They won that game in, it just couldn't have been more deflating. I'll go back to that word. It's just tough for fans to see how, with kind of the season riding on the line, a chance to bring the first ACC crown to Durham since 1989, a chance to potentially bring yourself to an ACC title game, which would then lead you to a college football playoff. And that's the way the team performed. I mean, there just doesn't really get more disappointing for fans than that. And you hope that Duke can at least win one more game and get itself into a bowl game, even though it's essentially meaningless. But I don't think 5-5 is where Duke fans imagine this team through 10 games of the season.
Yeah, no, let's talk about that. And again, just to drive home the point, how frustrating and honestly pathetic in some ways this was. A ranked opponent at home. At the start of the 4th quarter, Virginia was leading 31-3. You see the final score there being 34-17, a little bit more competitive. But at the start of the 4th quarter, 31-3, just not the Duke football team that we've seen all season. And now at 5-5, Hugh, against North Carolina, that's going to be a scrappy team. They're starting to figure things out. I know that the off-the-field storylines with Bill Belichick and everything that has happened throughout the course of the year have been so chaotic. But there's a reality where, you got to go on the road, and they're going to be fired up to win a game like this. How fitting would it be for Bill Belichick to pull through and win this rivalry game against Duke? At his introductory press conference, remember, he was talking about, he claimed his first words and the first thing that his family was doing was beat Duke. I mean, there's storylines there in that one. And then it's a Wake Forest team. Wake Forest is already bowl eligible. Like, you got to go out and now win one more game to be bowl eligible. Like, this would be an absolute disaster to step back fully this year if Duke were to somehow, some way not win one of these final games.
Yeah, well, geez, I mean, if we get into a situation where Duke, paid the immense contract for Darian Mensah, it's year 2 under Manny Diaz after a 9-4 season, a revamped defense, really a revamped offense that looked so good the first half of the season. And then you're going to tell people that after the season, Duke finishes 5-7 and doesn't even make a bowl game. That would,
yeah,
I don't.
But that's the reality right now. Ultimately, I don't think that. I do think Duke will somehow, some way pull through in one of these games where they're going to be favored. And still, though, it is possible that if this is an uninspired Duke football team for whatever reason, like we saw this past Saturday, like, yeah, wow, you went out, you paid the most for your quarterback, and you didn't even make a bowl game.
Yeah, well, it's funny to talk about that. Like, what are they fighting for at this point? You never want to say that with a Division I football team or a basketball team, because that's never the mentality. But it is in a way true at this point. Really, what are they fighting for? Conference title hopes are over at this point. You don't. I mean, you want to assume that they still want to win, but you can't really guarantee it, especially with how they looked over the past 2 weeks. I mean, it looked like that UConn loss really got to them. And now it just makes this last week of media headlines that the ACC was in that much more almost embarrassing for Duke, because there was so much talk as if when Duke was either the favorite or the second favorite to win the ACC. And there was so much talk. I remember Greg McElroy on ESPN was saying, if Duke as a 4-loss team wins the ACC, why aren't we taking a 12-1 James Madison Sun Belt champion or a 2-loss South Florida Tulane American champion and putting them in the playoff over Duke, and essentially leaving the ACC out of the college football playoff completely, because the top 4 conference champions get an automatic bid. That doesn't necessarily mean the ACC. Duke was getting a lot of hate because the specific scenario was if Duke won the conference. And now, Duke comes into a situation where it can get a nice win out, and at least prove that it deserved to be in the conversation. But I think all anyone's realized over the weekend, and Duke playing Virginia, was that Duke never deserved to be in any sort of college football playoff discussion, and, rightfully so.
I saw these comments a little bit last week and certainly online over the weekend, and I don't want to buy into it fully. I'm still super fired up that Darian Mensah chose, of all places, to play football at Duke, and I understand the money was certainly a part of the equation, and the buy-in that has been there with Duke football has been awesome these last few years. You still got to go back and you got to give credit to Mike Elko and what he was able to do. And there's part of you, Hugh. I see you shaking it stings a little bit. I saw the conversations online this is year 2 for Manny Diaz at Duke, which means it's year 2 for Mike Elko at Texas A&M. And we don't need to put Duke football in the same conversation at Texas A&M, but that guy has the Aggies, the number 3 team in the entire country, definitely on their way to the college football playoff. They're the only remaining undefeated team in the SEC. It's insane, the guy that was there for Duke leading the program and what he's now doing at his new spot.
Yeah, well, a heck of a comeback win for Mike Elko and A&M this weekend too. Down 31-3 to 3-6 South Carolina at half, came all the way back to win the game. Just impressive stuff. He just received a big extension. And I mean, yeah, if he's, he went on to coach at Texas A&M, you assume he's going to be one of the best coaches in the country. You take a Duke football program to success, but then you get hired by the SEC. It's completely new standards. And I mean, most coaches in the country are going to take an SEC job over an ACC job, just the way it's going to be. Obviously, well, you don't want to say you wish Mike Elko was still here, because Manny Diaz has done such a fantastic job, but you just wish there was some level of consistency to this season. Because last season, granted, Duke football wasn't expected to do very much, but there felt to be a level of this team is getting better throughout the season. And this has just felt like completely up and down, completely inconsistent. And you're trying to figure out what to like about this team, because week in and week out, there's a new thing that's a problem, and you don't understand what's going on. And right now, it just looks like their motivation. And against Virginia, because they have the talent to be a good team. They've shown the year, despite being 0-3 against ranked teams, they have the talent to win these games. But it's just frustrating to see a team that just looks deflated. We'll go back to it, and just looks like they don't want to be there some of the time.
All right, let's end on a positive note. We're excited. Let's see these games come for Duke. against UNC and against Wake Forest. Still don't like those guys. Beat NC State earlier this year. Still the opportunity in front of Duke to win every game of the season against your in-state ACC rivals and continue to dominate the state of North Carolina that we all know and love so much. So we'll end it there, Hugh. Tell me once again all about Ball Durham and how people can get involved and support you.
Yeah, I'm the site expert over at balldurham.com, powered by Fansided. That's BALLDURHAM.com. Got everything Duke news for you: recruiting, football, basketball, fan stuff, anything you need. Go check us out at balldurham.com. Love being on here, JJ, and we always appreciate it.
All right, we'll talk again next week, Hugh. Great to see you.
Yeah, you too, man.
All right, that's Hugh Straine joining us here on today's episode of Locked On Blue Devils. As that brings our show today to a close, let us know in the comments down below, what were your favorite parts of the Duke win over Indiana State? What do you think about Cameron Williams committing to Duke basketball? And finally, brutal loss for Duke football against Virginia. They'll bounce back this week against North Carolina. As always, go Duke. I'll talk to you again tomorrow. My name is JJ Jackson. Thank you and good day.